There will be nothing more important from this point to November than to every day make a point, if you will, to find out what the numbers are, reporting what they're saying in the battle between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Because no matter how many polls you choose to view, they will all report something different. Some of them will be incredibly biased, have no basis in fact. Others will be so accurate that they will indeed frighten those seeking everything from the White House to local animal control. More than the individuals, current polls complete the picture of not what America wants, but where they believe this country needs to go before the proverbial hell in a handbasket takes over. Which brings us to a nationwide survey on a few of the more contentious issues of the day. Your comments are necessary, demanded, as we move forward. Get on the line right now, 1-877-Newsmax, 1-877-639-7629. Get ready to be on point when called upon. Let's welcome to the Hardline, managing partner at Opinion Savvy, and a millennial bringing a different perspective on what the numbers really mean. Welcome Matthew Towery to the Hardline. Matthew, thanks for joining us. We're looking at all these numbers here, and again, as I said, we get bombarded by numbers, but when I first looked at what you've got out here, it all seemed rather common sense in so many ways. For instance, when you talk about 88% of the respondents said they would support prohibiting individuals suspected of terrorism from purchasing firearms. I went to myself, who are the 12% who, for whatever reason, wouldn't think that that's a common sense issue to begin with? So I just pointed out one thing here. What jumped out at you in these numbers, and what was important for you to get out there and mine and find out what people felt about it?
Well, I think, Ed, that it was most interesting that individuals in the U.S. are very much open to screening more heavily the foreign visitors to the U.S., specifically with regard to their ideologies. You know, it's not something that we talk about a lot, but you know, a lot of these countries that we do business with, a lot of these countries that we are partners with, have some fairly tough laws for activities and lifestyles that we consider completely commonplace. So it was interesting to see that Americans are willing to say, maybe we should look at this further.
Because you're a millennial then, and people always say that the younger generation doesn't vote, doesn't care, doesn't want to get involved, and sometimes doesn't have that common sense. When you broke this down and when you looked at it, what did you see the young vote asking for, and where did you see them falling in the questions?
You know, it was really interesting, Ed. The youngest demographic, the 18 to 29 demographic, they were the least satisfied with the current status of the U.S.'s efforts in combating terrorism. And as you progressed, you saw, you know, through the age demographics, you saw more and more satisfaction with what the U.S. is doing. So it was really interesting to see that my own generation is really not happy with what we're currently doing. You know, that said, they're also very supportive of a lot of the more hardcore legislation, such as declaring war on ISIS and Donald Trump's proposed temporary ban on Muslims. They were by far the most approving demographic of those pieces of proposed legislation.
1-877-Newsmax, 1-877-Newsmax if you want to weigh in on what we're talking about here. Let's put this into the mix here. Eric Trump, Donald Trump's son, made this statement. He thinks he knows why his dad is trailing by such a large margin in the ABC News poll. Here's what he said.
They actually admitted to polling many more Democrats than they did Republicans in that poll. So, I mean, it's
36% of Democrats, 24% of Republicans.
It seems like every single time they come out with a poll, these are the exact numbers we get. You know, they always seem to be the outlier. So it really makes you wonder what's actually happening.
So, Matthew, how do we trust these polls? This is a great question that the American people are constantly asking themselves, because you have a liberal poll that will come over here and they basically ask a lot of Democrats the questions. You have a conservative poll, gets a lot of Republicans on the question. And I think people are trying to figure out what the real backbone of America wants. So how do we know who and what to trust?
Well, I trust the performance, Ed. And there have been a few different studies Most recently, Bloomberg actually did a study, and admittedly, they participated in polling themselves and had a severe miss through the Seltzer company in Iowa earlier this year. But I would take a look at the performance, and they have done exactly that. And we can see the poll that Eric Trump was referencing. I haven't taken a look at the actual poll, but they are a well-regarded polling outfit, and it would be tough to argue with the results. I would say it's still very far out, though, and anything that we see now is subject to change at a moment's notice.
Let me circle back to something I said at the top here, Matthew, because I think it's important before we get to a couple of phone calls here. I use the words common sense.
Sure.
And a lot of what you found in these, 88% prohibiting individuals suspected of terror from purchasing a gun, firearms, 83% stripping the citizenship of U.S. citizens who declare their allegiance to ISIS or any terrorist organization, 78 require foreign individuals entering the U.S. to agree to uphold principles of the Constitution. Isn't this all just real common sense stuff when you get down to it that we really don't talk about enough?
Well, you would think it is common sense, Ed, and until we actually see these policies put in place, I don't know how common sense they really are. They certainly have support, and especially now we're seeing a push for banning individuals who are on the terror watch list from purchasing firearms and explosives. I think that certainly is common sense, and finally something is happening there. But for the rest of these, I agree. Common sense, but not so common legislatively.
Look, my grandmother always used to tell me common sense is not that common, and I'm finding that out every single day, as a matter of fact. I think as we watch the political races, it is certainly that. 1-877 Newsmax. Pansy from South Carolina is here. Let me ask you a question here, Pansy, because I know you say that you're voting for Trump no matter what. Let's put that aside for just a second here, though, okay? How much do you trust the polls?
I do not trust the polls at all.
Any poll, doesn't make a difference what it is. You don't care, Republican, Democrat, left, right, it makes no difference.
Not really. I know Donald Trump's going to win because America has to have him. We've got to have somebody with good sense.
But what about the polls, though, Pansy? Let's stay on the polls. Let's stay focused here. Why don't you trust the polls? Tell me why.
Because, like Eric Trump said earlier, they call all kinds of people. I've only had 2 or 3 people call me, and I'm a Republican.
Okay, we appreciate that comment. Pansy, thanks a lot for your call, 1-877 Newsmax. Here's Doris from Miramar, Florida. Doris, let me ask you the same question here. You think Republicans should speak for Donald Trump at the convention. We get that. But when it comes to the polls and the numbers, do you look at them every day? Do you trust them? Do you put a lot of salt in what the polls say?
No, because I know the polls are rigged. Everybody wants Hillary because, Hillary is the status quo, but I'm a black American and I don't want Hillary. I voted for Barack and I'm fed up with the Democrats. So I'm voting for Donald Trump.
Okay, we appreciate the call. Thanks a lot, Doris. I got a couple minutes left here, Matthew. So when you take polls like this, let's look for something positive here, okay?
Okay.
How do we then... Well, if you think about it, because we're talking about common sense here, and unfortunately it's not that positive because there's not a lot of common sense out there these days. How do you, in your position here, because you have a finger on the pulse of America here, how do we make people understand that the polls are genuine? How do we make people believe in them and at least give them some reference here and believe them?
Well, that's tough, Ed, because it's really outside of the pollsters' hands. With the exception of a few of the larger media outlets, we don't often get the chance to really interact with common folks who might actually be taking the polls or are just reading them. So it's tough. But I think that the first thing that we really need to do is be transparent about our methodology as well as who we work for. There is an initiative out there and a lot of pollsters have joined. That's seen some really positive results. but especially with regard to who actually sponsors the poll, who the pollsters work for. Do a little bit of research, and you'll see.
Well, it's polls like this on Opinion Savvy, looking at people and getting some of these real issues here, because obviously this is a lot about immigration. This fits right into what Donald Trump has been saying in so many ways. It works with the Republican message as well out there, and it's something that people should, and I'm going to suggest the polls from Opinion Savvy. Go ahead, put it in as part of your daily. Look at it and take it as something that you can use to make a decision. Matthew Towery, fascinating stuff. Thanks so much for joining us, my friend. We appreciate this. The real future of immigration reform in America. And why is it that a certain candidate still can't keep from a change of mind every now and then on some of these issues? Plus more of your phone calls at 1-877-Newsmax when the Hardline continues.